Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Broken Banquet, a podcast about missions. We are your hosts, Will Bailey and Dr. Ashley Goad, and we are so glad that you have joined us for another conversation about the church and missions, about what healthy mission relationships can look like, and as we hear from others who have dedicated their lives in one way or another to mission work. We're so glad you're here, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Will.
How are you?
I'm fine. And you?
I'm fine. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. How was your weekend away in the mountains?
It was just right. We drove to a little community about an hour south of here called San Jeronimo,
Mm-hmm.
parked the car, and then started walking. It took us an hour and a half to walk 4 kilometers, which is a little over 2 miles.
Right.
But it's because it's almost straight up the side of a
Oh,
mountain.
that
But
sounds exactly like something I would want to do.
yeah, I thought several times as we were walking, and Yolanda and I were sort of thinking about the people that we would like to do that with. Ashley would hate this. Um, so you're not on the list. Uh, but it's amazing. I mean, once you get up to our friend's farm, it's silent, and it's just on the top of this ridge, and you can see forever. And we had an amazing, after it rained really hard, then we had an amazing sunset, and it
Mm.
got really cold that night, which was kind of what I was hoping for. And then, after several wonderful meals and some time with these friends of ours, the next morning we walked back down. So it was great.
Oh, that's so nice. Yolanda kept sending me photos and made me really want to be there with y'all, but maybe I could just jump out of an airplane
Right.
and land where you are.
Maybe you could. Yeah. But yeah, it was good. Thanks for asking.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Glad that y'all are back and safe and sound.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have listened to last week's episode of The Broken Banquet 3 times now.
I've had several people send me nice notes.
It was Dr. Dwayne Elmer. If you just happen to be listening, thank you once again so much for being on our podcast. It was such a treat. And every time I
Mhm.
listen to the episode, I learn something new. So thank you.
Yeah, it was really good. Um, Definitely hope he will be on the short list of people that we circle back around and talk to again.
I'd love to get he and Dr. Hunter Farrell and Dr. Julie Dodge all on the same podcast together.
Yeah, that would be amazing. There would be very little for the two of us to say.
Which would be even better.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, sounds really appealing. So who are we talking to today, Ashley?
We are talking to a fella named Matt Keifer, and I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times before he set out on his call and journey with his wife April and their kids to Quito, Ecuador. And we got to chat with him today about his call and the first year of his ministry. This is the first time we've had all these teaching episodes, and now this is the first time that we've had somebody on that this is brand new for them. So we're getting him right on the cusp of beginning his call and journey.
Yeah, I hope everybody will enjoy hearing from Matt.
Meet Matt Keifer, friends. Well, hey, Matt.
Hello.
That
Thank you
was
for
it.
having
I
me.
was just gonna
Oh,
say
that's
hey.
all. That's it.
I'm the really bad interviewer, by the way, and
Okay.
and
Well,
Will's the really good interviewer. And then I sometimes I hit a little gold at like maybe once per
I'm
podcast, and that's it.
okay. Well, I'm completely out of my league, so it's all on you guys to make this
That
a worthwhile listen.
Yeah,
no one has ever been out of their league on this podcast, I can assure you.
except for Will and me when some of these.
Right, right.
Oh man. All right. Well, here, let me start with this. Well, hey, Will, today we have a great guest on the podcast, and his name is Matt Keifer. And right now he's sitting in Quito, Ecuador. And I've been really excited about introducing you to Matt. So Matt, meet Will. Will, meet Matt.
Nice to meet you, Will. Thank you.
Hey, It's nice to meet you too, Matt. Thanks so much for being on the Broken Banquet.
Well, I met Matt here. This is how things always start, Will, is that I tell
Right.
you how I met someone. So, I work here in Shreveport, Louisiana at First United Methodist Church, and a guy named Pat Day was the senior pastor here, and he knew a guy named Matt Keifer. And I don't know how long you guys went back.
Just a few years, really.
Okay. Well, one day Matt was sitting in Pat's office, Matt and Pat, and they were chatting together. And so, of course, anytime anyone who has any type of global interest was sitting in front of Pat, I always got a phone call. So I came running down the hallway and couldn't wait to meet Matt and to hear some of his call story as a missionary. He and his wife, April, and their kids were exploring the call to the mission world, uh, and to Quito, Ecuador. So, Matt, before we go in, I thought I'll let Will introduce himself a little bit to you too, since y'all have never met each other.
And before I do that, I just want to say how cool it is to be talking to someone who is in Quito, Ecuador. When I started college at UNC Wilmington, I was pretty sure I was going to just get a business degree, and I was going to major in international business and minor in Spanish. And because of that, I spent a summer in Quito living with a family
Wow.
and studying Spanish. And as soon as I got back to UNCW from that summer, I changed my major to Spanish, my minor to Latin American studies, never took another business class. And so it was huge because obviously being able to speak Spanish is way more useful for what I'm doing now. So there's a special place in my heart for Ecuador and for Quito and the family that I lived with that were so generous and wonderful to me. So it's exciting to talk to someone who is in ministry in Ecuador.
Very cool. I'll say that I took the exact opposite road as you in Shreveport, Louisiana. Did the business thing, hated Spanish, couldn't wait to get out of high school Spanish, never wanted to learn Spanish, and here I am in Ecuador speaking Spanish,
Awesome.
not
Isn't that
doing
and
great?
not doing anything business.
and weren't you supposed to do language school in Costa Rica?
Yes, that was our plan. So we were supposed to go do our tour of Costa Rica and do language school, but COVID hit 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave. And then, of course, you couldn't get into Costa Rica for what, 9, 10 months once COVID
Mm-hmm.
hit as a foreigner. And so we sat around in Shreveport, waiting to go for probably about 5 or 6 months before before the airport opened in Quito. And we bought one of the first flights once they opened up
Mhm.
the airport in Quito.
So I've lived here in Costa Rica since 2003, and I've spent long stretches here where I haven't gone back to the States. But during the pandemic, for that period where the airport was shut down, was so weird because it was the first time that
Strange.
I was here and couldn't leave. Like all the other
Right.
times, all those years when I had stayed, it had been my choice to stay. And now
Right.
suddenly I had no choice in the matter. I was just here whether I wanted to be or not. And I mean, I wanted to be because it's where my family was and all that. But man, that was just a bizarre period of time, for everybody for any number of reasons.
Hmm. I was thankful to be your first visitor after COVID opened up the
We
airport.
we were thankful for that too, Ashley. Let's back up a little bit. So, Ashley and I have known each other and worked together for a long time, and we have a lot of conversations about missions and about mission relationships, and it's always been really fun and entertaining for the two of us to have those conversations with one another. And so we just decided a few months ago, why don't we start including other people in those conversations and getting some other perspectives, and also do it in a way that people who care to listen can listen in. So we started the Broken Banquet podcast. I mean, we're talking to missionaries all over the world who are serving in very different contexts. They're doing what they're doing in a lot of different ways. We're excited to talk to you because there's something that you all are doing that's pretty unique that we haven't talked to anybody yet that is
Mhm.
going about it the way that you are reaching out into the community.
Right.
We definitely love hearing from missionary families and just what that experience is like
Yeah.
for the family.
So we're just looking forward to spending this time with you and getting to know you better, and for our listeners to get to know you and your family and just tell your story, man. And we'll have some questions for you along the way, but we're just excited about hearing from you.
Excellent. Let's do it.
Yes, yeah. So why don't you just start off by telling us who you are, Matt, and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, so I am Matt Keifer. I am from Shreveport, Louisiana, pretty much born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana. Uh, Passed up a lot of job opportunities because I never really wanted to leave Shreveport, Louisiana. My wife is from Shreveport, Louisiana. All my kids are born in Shreveport, Louisiana. And we were, whatever normal is, we were that. We built a pretty nice middle class lifestyle. I was in insurance sales. I was an insurance agent. I worked for State Farm for more than 10 years. After that, I left State Farm. I went out on my own. I had an independent insurance office. I did that for 4 years, and for some reason, God called us to Quito, Ecuador.
Hmm.
Uh, Really was never on our radar. I mean, I'd done some mission trips in my past. I had been to several Latin American countries, but had never had a conversation with my wife about foreign missions. So honestly, when God put this on my heart, it scared me to death. I was like,
Yeah.
that's the last person I want to talk to right now is my wife and say, hey, I think God is calling us into a foreign country. Just started talking to people that I trust, that knew me, that knew my life, knew my background, and that I could just let out what is going on in my heart.
Hmm.
And everybody I talked to said, "You need to talk to April. You need to talk to April." And it probably took me 2 weeks to get the courage to talk to April. In the same way that God was working in my heart and had done things in my heart, really unbeknownst to myself, He was doing the same thing in my wife's heart, April. I really don't know how to explain it, but there were heart changes that were going on that allowed us both when this opportunity came, or when God put these thoughts and feelings into our heart, that we were all in. We were excited about it,
Hmm.
and so just about 4 years ago, we started the journey into foreign missions. Ignorant as ignorant can be,
Yeah.
we grew up in a church that did not do missions well. And so I didn't even know what missions was. And so, if you think about like the hierarchy of church missionaries at the top, right? It's like, you have the people in the service, you have the church leaders, you have some deacons, and then above them's the pastors, and then it's like the uber spiritual people are the actual missionaries. And so when, when I was thinking, holy, like, you want me to be a what? A missionary? No, that's not me. I'm the church goer. I'm certainly not more spiritual than the pastor of my church is. So it's just it is that weird dynamic, and I'm still not there where I need to be. God still needs to do a lot of work in my heart. I still don't like being called a missionary, and
I don't
so
know any missionary who does.
yeah.
So there you
Well,
go.
my friends love it. They call me Missionary Matt, and think it's hilarious. But so, like I said, it's been about 4 years into this journey. God did some really cool things, not only in our heart, but just did a lot of amazing things that are difficult to explain in the natural world, that really got us through these doors. I know it's not for everybody, but it's for us. So we moved to Quito 2.5 years ago, and are working with a soccer ministry here in Quito, Ecuador.
I want to know more about that. How did you choose Quito? Is there a sending agency involved, like with any training? And
Mhm.
how did soccer come into play? Those are three questions.
I'd never heard of Quito, Ecuador before.
Hmm.
When I thought about Ecuador, I thought, jungle. That was probably the only thing that I knew about Ecuador. And so, how I honestly, I couldn't even tell you like what in my mind planted Quito, Ecuador in my heart. A lot of it was just kind of doing some research about missions, and really from there I started learning about Ecuador. We started having conversations with people, and everything started leading to Quito, Ecuador. Quito, Ecuador started coming up in every conversation. Either people that we knew, were deeply involved in Quito, Ecuador, or we even met a girl that was from Quito, Ecuador during this time. Like I said, just a lot of strange things. And then, God began to open more doors, that got us all the way through of making sure that Quito, Ecuador was the place.
Were these conversations that you were having when you were sort of narrowing it down to Quito, were they conversations that did you grow up in a denominational structure where there's missions organizations that do the sending and they were part of those conversations? Was it just a local church? Was it just within your family? Just to have a little bit of context.
Yeah.
Because it's, I know some people sort of have this image of a missionary family sitting around a table and spinning a globe and just like stopping it with their finger, and wherever their finger lands, that's where they go. And of course, we could do a whole episode about that. But
Right.
I'm just curious, like, what was the context for these conversations
Yeah.
that you're having that are leading to you feeling led to this specific place?
Yeah. So I grew up, I'm from a Southern Baptist background. My wife as well is in a Southern Baptist background. So really all we knew about missions was IMB, right?
Yeah.
And, I did a little bit of homework on what it looks like to be an IMB missionary, especially in today's world, and quickly found out like I didn't meet any of the guidelines. And so I knew that was out. And so, I was, my kids were too old. I didn't have, the education. And then even at that point, I knew that that Quito, Ecuador was where God wanted us to be, and then I found out IMB is not really active here. And so really through those conversations or through, that kind of same time period, we began trying to connect with different mission organizations in Quito, Ecuador. Again, my faith is lacking in almost every single regard. And so, I would like to say that I sat in the corner and prayed a lot, but I probably did the opposite. I probably got out ahead of God and started connecting. I mean, that's what I did in the business world before is, when I have a question, who knows the answer to it? And so we had determined that me and my family were going to go to Quito, Ecuador for the summer. And we just said, we'll go and we're going to serve. And, when we see it, hopefully God will say, hey, this is it. And hopefully we'll know. That was, me putting God in a box and saying, this is how we were going to find out what we were supposed to do. And so anyways, I started sending a bunch of emails out with different mission organizations in Quito, Ecuador. And really throughout the process, doors opened, doors closed. Everything kept leading back to Inca Link International, which is now my sending organization. They are in 8 different countries, 25 plus mission sites, ministry sites. I love my mission organization. It's a non-denominational, so an independent missional organization that is founded by second generation missionary kids. And I'll say I'm the most green out of anybody that's in our organization. They're all about empowering locals, which I love about Inca Link and the heart of Inca Link. And so the director of the ministry that I work for, he as well is a second generation missionary kid. His wife is a second generation missionary kid. That seems to be the common theme, or used to be the requirement for Inca Link International was to be a missionary kid. And thankful it wasn't like that, because I am the farthest thing from a missionary kid. But they really believe in allowing people to live out the gifts that God has given them in creative ways in order to reach the 300 million Latin American youth.
Thank you for answering that question. And I think the next thing Ashley had asked about was just preparation. What was your training and preparation like?
Where me and my wife were able to go to I'm trying to even think what it was. It was a conference, really concentrating on family dynamics. Me and my wife did a lot of, marital counseling during that time as well. Just talking about things, because I'll be honest, like when we came here for the 1 month that we came down here before we said, hey, this is where we're coming and this is where we're going to move. It was not like the greatest experience for me and my wife. It's difficult, to live outside of your comfort zone, for one day in the States was rare to me. I mean, if something was outside of my comfort zone in 5 minutes, I was going to change it. And so to come to Quito, Ecuador, the first time where there is no comfort zone, it was not, great for our relationship. But in a lot of ways, like it helped us to know what we need to talk about, what we need to discuss, like what are the things that we're going to struggle with that we need to learn how to talk about before they become a problem.
Mhm. So when you got there to Ecuador, you entered into this soccer ministry. How did you get into the soccer ministry there in Quito?
Again, God. I,
I love it.
I
Yeah.
I grew up playing sports. Sports were a big part of my life. I grew up in a broken home. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old. I can contribute a lot about who I am because of sports. Like I said, I didn't grow up with a dad, but I consistently had great coaches and dads of friends that were also my coaches that poured into me and taught me what it looked like, to be a husband, to be a dad, and gave me opportunities, taught me how to connect, how to talk, how to, really in a lot of ways, like how to survive. They were my mentors, and allowed me to be successful in the business world. And so any success that I ever have or had in life, I can contribute a lot, most of it, to these dads and coaches through sports that, were a godsend to me. And so really when we began talking to Inca Link, they began talking to me about the soccer ministry. And honestly, I had read about it on their website. And at the time, they've since redone the website, but the website was not well done before. And it had a bunch of old information about the soccer ministry. And I'd read about it. And I was like, man, I'm really not interested in teaching soccer to 7-year-olds. But as they began to express, what the ministry is, what it does, and then what their needs were, I immediately got excited. I remember being on the Zoom call. I was trying to hide it, and in some ways it scared me too. We got off the phone call. My wife was like, "What do you think about the soccer ministry?" And I was like, "It sounds like temptation." I said, "It sounds too good to be true." I said, "You're going to tell me we're going to get to be missionaries, but I'm going to get to be essentially like a general manager of a soccer club, of a sports franchise." I was like, "No, this doesn't happen." I said, "We're going to end up having to clean toilets, or God forbid, I'm going to have to preach or something." And and I guess in like deep down, I was, struggling with that because again, ignorant to missions. I thought that God was going to make me do something that I didn't want to do, and only the way God does it, He orchestrated this beautiful thing. And so, anyways, there's this soccer ministry down in Quito, Ecuador, that their sole purpose is to reach guys and women and kids that will never walk through a church door for a myriad of reasons. But their goal and vision is to be the biggest soccer club in all of Ecuador and then all of South America in order to give us the biggest platform to share Christ. And it's a big vision, a big goal. But, for me, it was right up my alley. I can't think of anything else, I would rather have done. And so I get to have a lot of fun with what I do. We now have 250 soccer players on our soccer club between men, women, and kids starting at 5 years old.
So what does a day to day look like for you, Matt?
Every day is different. I mean, that's one of the things I love about, ministry in general is
Uh-huh.
every day looks different. So one day, you're fundraising. The next day, you are discipling with for me, discipling with a player, walking through life. The next day it's solving a problem that, one of our players is getting kicked out of their house. One day I get to mow the grass, which is honestly like that's one of my favorite days of the week is I get to put in my headphones, turn on a good podcast, and mow grass for about 2 to 3 hours. And so, yeah, every day is a little bit different. My actual title for the club is business I'm the director of business, I think is my official title. But really what I do is I work a lot with key partners in the States that allow ministry to happen. God's opening some incredible doors for us as a soccer club in the United States that we are walking through. And I am with our men's team almost on a daily basis, especially in season. We practice at night. And so usually, I have office, quote unquote, office hours, from about 9 o'clock in the morning to about 3. Kids get out of school at 3. I try to spend a little bit of time with them. Then they go to soccer practice. I'm usually at their soccer practice there, and that they're with our club as well. We try to eat dinner together as a family, and then at 7 o'clock, I leave and don't get back till about 9:15 every night. And so right now, that's what a typical day looks like for me.
Can you share a little bit about what the last couple of years have looked like through the eyes of your kids?
For what it seems to me. But I mean, of course, I think during the training that we had before this process started, we started reading through the book, Third Culture Kids. It was something completely foreign to us. In a lot of ways, again, ignorant to the fact that because we're selfish people, right? And so I'm thinking, God's going to send us to Ecuador. Well, first of all, like I have a lot of problems with that, and what are all the problems that I'm going to experience through that? That's where my mind goes at least. And then it's like, okay, well, I get out of my selfishness a little bit, and it's like, crap, I have my wife, and how is this going to work? How are we going to be married? What is this going to look like? And then, so it's like that's like 3 steps down the road of thinking about other people. But, the the term third culture kid, I had as one I'd never heard of before. And so I didn't know anything about it. So anything that we know about it now, we've learned in the last few years. But I think we've all determined at this point that we're going to screw up our kids. It's just a matter of what degree their screwed upness is going to be. And so, we joke around that, our kids are going to go the same way we did. Like we go to counseling and we have X amount of issues. And so, like if our kids are going to have 10 issues, like how can we get them to have 7 issues? And so that's kind of how we approach a lot of their problems. And, I think the oldest one is going to have a lot different experience than the youngest one.
Right.
We
Sure.
just got back from Shreveport, which is our quote unquote home, and my oldest daughters that they have a very difficult time. Um, they've now been away from there for 3 years now, but when we go back, they don't remember what life was like 3 years ago. They know what life is like now. Well, now they go back, nobody works because everybody takes off work because everybody wants to spend time with family. We usually go around holidays, and so everybody's getting presents. So they get to spend the night with family, cousins, everything else. So there's no bedtimes, there's no school, there's no structure, and everybody loves you. To them, like Louisiana is, I mean, in a lot of ways, like that's heaven on earth. Like I get to go somewhere where I have no responsibilities, and and I think they know that people have responsibilities, but they don't see it. And so they think nobody works. So, it's like we come to Ecuador and, daddy's got to go to work. Daddy's got soccer practice. I have to go to school. I have to go to bed at a certain time. And so it's hard. It's hard to have that adjustment, where, in a lot of ways they don't see life the same. It's two different worlds. And so it's like there's this, I mean, hard thing about life here in Ecuador, with all this structure, and then there's this whole other side of Shreveport that's
Right.
fairy tale land for them. But my youngest is completely different. After like 4 days, he's like, "Hey, let's go home." For him, home is Quito, Ecuador. He wants to go. He wants his bed. And so, their experiences are going to be completely different. But I mean, I think, like anything, we talk to our kids, we try to gauge how they're feeling. In a lot of ways, you feel like you have adult conversations a lot more, and it forces them to think. And we do ask a lot of probing questions about, what's really eating at you.
Mhm. Have you had a moment in Quito yet where you sat back, maybe with April as you're, just decompressing from the day and gone, yes, this is why we're in Quito?
Absolutely. I'd say that it happens regularly.
Oh, good.
Um, but I mean, just for instance, I mean, just last week. So I didn't get into all this. So our men's team is actually a professional soccer club.
Hmm.
So they are in the third tier of Ecuadorian soccer, which is our vision and goal. Like I said before, is to be the biggest club. So in order to do that, like we're going to be professional. It sounds a lot more interesting and cooler than it really is. These are not professional athletes that you have like the highest paid player on our team. Makes like $150 a month for the length of the season, which is like 4 months. So nobody's getting rich doing this, but the majority of our kids come from really, really hard backgrounds. The the kids that come to us probably getting, I'm going to geek out in soccer for like 35 seconds.
Great.
But we are third tier of Ecuadorian soccer. So there are two tiers above us. And the majority of players that we have are with us usually for one reason or another, but a lot of them are because they couldn't make it or something happened for them to not be first or second tier. And so normally what happens is kids get identified when they're 12 to 14 years old of having a lot of talent, and they get signed by one of these top teams, and they move away from wherever they're at. So this kid in particular I'm thinking of, he moved from the coast of Ecuador. His family was in farming, has nothing, but he moved to Quito, Ecuador when he was 12 years old. So at that point, he dropped out of school. He bet it all on soccer, and he was in a new place. He's 12 years old. He's now around kids that are 14, 15, had never been away from mama before, made a lot of really bad choices. And essentially for the last, he is 19 now. So he came to us 2 years ago. So really for 6 years, I mean, he's been in glorified slavery, working a job, working 60 hours a week, making about $300 a month, which is illegal. But like at first, he wouldn't even tell us that because he didn't trust us enough. He has, what he has said, a seventh grade education. He can't write his full name without looking at his ID. And so last year, we've been able to heavily invest in John, basically take care of his basic needs in life. And then we got him back into school. So he's in the accelerated high school program. So in 3 years, he'll have a high school diploma, but he carries himself differently. He has a sense of pride. His head is held higher. He looks people in the eye. He has more confidence. And so, after that day, he didn't pull out his ID in order to sign his name. Like that's a tremendous win. And so, it's like you go back to the house, and that's in addition to, like the physical, mental, and spiritual growth that he has made over the last 6 months, which has been incredible. But I mean, to see that and to see like an actual, like that's generational life change,
Hmm.
more than just, for this day, like you made an impact, but in John's life, he has opportunity in life that he'd have never had, that actually allow him to grow spiritually.
How does your organization incorporate faith and
Yeah.
discipleship into the athletic? I mean, this is fantastic. This is life-changing stuff that you're talking about already, which is important enough on its own. So guys, this is going to sound weird, but like, so where does someone like John see Jesus in
Yeah.
you all getting him out of that situation into an apartment, helping him with his education, all that kind of stuff?
First and foremost, we don't hide who we are. They know that we're a Christian club. We pray with the guys every single night. We have FCA chaplains that are readily around, usually sharing Bible studies of some point. almost on a daily basis, you're going to hear a Bible story or an illustration in some form or fashion. Every day we are letting them know who Christ is. And more importantly, letting them know is actually showing them. So I think a lot of people around here, they haven't rejected God or rejected Jesus, like they've rejected religion. They've
Mm-hmm.
rejected people that judge them. They've rejected, a place that you have to, dress a certain way, act a certain way, be a certain thing, and not accepted for who they are. And so, that's what we show them. Our kind of unofficial motto of the club is, give them a place to belong before they believe. And so that, in a roundabout way, that's what we do. That's how we connect, and really entering in with relationships. And so, building trust relationships on a soccer field, it's not rocket science what we do. We love them. And
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of them, it's the first time that they've ever felt love, and they know it's different. But yeah, of course, we're always relating it back to why. Why do
Mm-hmm.
we do this? And it always comes down because God loves us.
And I think that's great that if they at some point in their lives have been mistreated by the church, that what you're giving them is an alternative way to understand what the church, I mean,
Yeah.
the real way to understand what church is, and sort of redefining that for them, and saving that relationship. What were you going to say, Ashley?
I was just saying that that's so much of what we're called to do is to be the salt and the light, that we live our lives in such a way, and that so much fruit just naturally flows out of us that people are going to be drawn to us and say, "What makes you different?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you act the way that you do?" And Matt, I can assure you that you and April are that, and that people come to you naturally just by seeing the way that you love naturally, and how you've cared so much for that group of guys and gals who are playing. The name of your club is
Uh, Let me say it in an English accent or a Spanish accent.
Spanish, of
do your
course.
do your best Ecuadorian accent.
Now I'm going to butcher it with pressure on me, but it's called Casa Deportiva Cumbre Alta.
So you've brought to the house summit Cumbre, you've brought it to them of that light and love. I love that.
So I'd like to switch gears a little bit. You've done a great job of describing your journey as a family and describing the kind of work that you all are doing now. Can you talk a little bit about the relationships between your family, your organization, and the people who support you? Because one of the things that we hope will come out during this podcast is sort of highlighting some of the healthy ways that those relationships take shape, and then some of the unhealthy ways, some of the unhealthy expectations, or there's different models, and we want to focus on the good ones. So would you explain a little bit how is your family supported? What is your contact with your supporters like? That sort of
Man,
thing.
this is a big question. It forces us to be raw in a lot of ways, and there's obviously some really good things that come out of being support raised and fundraising, and I'm thankful for what I do, and I'm even thankful for the burden that I carry in fundraising. But at the same time, like, there is a cost, and I would say I've not lost relationships, but definitely there are relationships that are strained, and from my role as fundraiser, whether that be for us personally or for the ministry. And so, yeah, I mean, there are, people that, you've known for a really long time and won't answer a text message back or an email, or won't pick up the phone. And it's hard for sure. But I mean, I'd say so just structural wise, we are support raised, again, through Inca International. So we exist. We're able to be down here as missionaries because people have chosen to support what we do, and buy into our vision and mission of bringing Christ to Quito through soccer. And it's the same way with our ministry. So our ministry is a ministry site of Inca International as well. And so we fundraise for us personally, and then fundraise for the ministry as well. And so, it's trying to balance that. How it's done well. For example, I had a phone call last week with somebody that I had never met before this conversation. I got in touch with her from another supporter, and I left that phone call one rejuvenated, encouraged, loved, and it's like a genuine authenticity flowed out of her, where you could tell, because I think a lot of people say call me for anything, or let me know when you need something, but it's rare for somebody to actually
Mhm.
say everything that you need. I at least want to hear about it, so that I can either help you do it, connect you with somebody that can, or pray for you.
Mhm.
People assume that my expectation is just to have money, and it's not.
Mhm.
Most of the fruitful conversations I have, and what sometimes rejuvenates me and encourages me the most, is not money at all. It's true authenticity, or just excitement about what I'm doing or what we're doing, because that's what I get excited about. I don't
Yeah.
get excited about selling insurance anymore. I get excited about walking alongside a guy like John, and seeing his life be forever different.
Mhm.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if after having a conversation with this certain person, at the end of that conversation, you said you felt loved and encouraged,
Mhm.
regardless of what the things were that you talked about and the
Right.
details and the sort of where you settled or whatever. The fact of the matter is, because of the contact with that person and the relationship that's developing with that person, you feel love and encouraged. And people need to hear that, because I think that needs to be the priority. The relationship needs to be the priority. The needs of the ministry will be met if the relationship is a priority. And that's,
Mhm.
this is sort of something that I know I sound like a broken record sometimes, but I've been saying a lot lately how different it is if, instead of our actions defining our relationships define our actions. And there's a huge difference there. We may wind up doing the same things, but they mean something different.
Mhm.
So you can have somebody who commits to supporting your family or supporting the soccer club, and what that means to them is, I write a check, or
Mhm.
I donate uniforms, or whatever it may be. And maybe once a year, once every 6 months, we get sort of a progress report, and that's it. So those actions have sort of defined what the relationship is. But for someone who says, so there's this family that we've connected with, and there's this ministry that's doing these things. And because of the relationship that we're developing with this family and with this ministry and the way they're present in the community, here are the actions that sort of flow out of that. It might be the exact same thing. They might write a check, they might send uniforms, but it means something completely different because it started with the relationship first.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's so important for people to hear that, for churches to hear that when you are considering making a commitment to a missionary, to a family, or to a ministry. Understand that what they probably need from you most is a relationship, is companionship, is faithful friendship. And the fruits of that will be the things that may sustain the actual work of the ministry.
And just to be completely transparent and raw for just a minute, it's it's lonely. It's lonely on the mission field, or can be.
I can assure you, you are not the first one who has said that.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have heard that almost in every episode from the missionaries, is
Yeah.
how lonely this can be. Yeah.
I mean, you're disconnected from every relationship that you built in your life. At least
Mhm.
us, from essentially being born and raised, spending 35 years in Shreveport, like every relationship, especially every meaningful relationship I have, is based in Shreveport. And so
Yeah.
you're disconnected from all of those relationships. You don't hear the same stories. You're not listening to the local news. You're all of those things. And so it's hard. It can be hard, and especially when, there are relationships that you actually really just crave the relationship, and you're
Mhm.
wanting to actually hear about their life, hear about, what's going on with their kids or what's going on with sports, or those are hard to have because everybody assumes you're calling them to fundraise, and there's just not time. I know everybody's busy, and so it's hard to say, hey, I need an hour of your time just to talk. And so those things are hard, and that there's only so much time in my day. And so like I do have a full-time job with the ministry, and fundraising is a part of that job. And so like in that side of it, it's hard to manage relationship versus things that actually have to get done. And so it's like you have a conversation and you want to catch up, but at some point, like the conversation turns to quote unquote business. But yeah, I just say absolutely. I would have never known that before. No, I'd be the first person to say, I'm glad that you said that other people feel the same, but yeah, it's lonely. And we have great community. We have great relationships here. But even that, it's lonely.
And we've covered your story, we've covered your work, we've talked about support and relationships. Ashley, is there something else you want to dive into before we kind of wrap things up?
So
Mm-hmm.
I think the only other question that we'll wrap up with is, oftentimes here at the Broken Banquet, we talk about sitting at the table and having a meal together and learning from each other. So if you were to think about your time at the table with Ecuadorians, what are those Ecuadorians bringing to the table that we can learn something?
I think people here, yeah, they do a really good job about including people. Nobody is ever going to get excluded. So, if the poorest person on the team brings a bag of chips, every single person is going to be offered that bag of chips, even though he just spent every dollar he had on that bag of chips. And I think it's changed my life in a lot of ways. And then just the family aspect of it. It's been a blast to be able to have my kids involved in what we do. And there's nobody more excited when Jack, my 4-year-old son, comes on the soccer field than our soccer players. They embrace and love Jack, sometimes better than I do, and more excited to see them, sometimes than when I get home. And so I think what Ecuador would bring to the table is sharing, a sense of selflessness, and then just excitement to see and to build into people and make people feel special.
Hmm, I love
That's
that.
awesome. Generosity, hospitality, grace, all
Mhm.
that is, I want that to be at the table.
Well, Matt, we've really enjoyed having you on the podcast today.
Thank you.
It's been great. Anytime you want to call and talk about Shreveport, let's just do it.
Okay, that's a deal.
Hey, it was great to meet you, Matt. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And you've made all of these fond memories of Ecuador and Quito come flooding back to me. So I appreciate that too. But it's been great getting to know you and hear about
Thank
what
you.
you and your family are doing. And we'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Yep. See ya. Bye, Ashley.
Bye, Will. Bye, Matt. So, Will, I wonder, what is something that you learned from this interview with Matt?
Well, it made me think a lot about how many different kind of paths there are that lead people into the mission field. And one of I've always talked about how different people do ministry in different ways in different places. So you can't have just this cookie cutter, like, 1, 2, 3 step process that just one size fits all. And I know that my journey was different from Matt's journey, which was different from Nate and Whitney's journey, which was different from everybody we've talked to. It's been a different process for each one, and it makes me think a lot about how fortunate I was to have grown up in a church that was so supportive of missions, that was part of a denomination that was also really supportive of missions. And so there was this whole system and there was a model that I could use as needed. um, and I used it a little less than some other people have used it, but it was just helpful to, at least for me, to kind of take steps, knowing that there was all this sort of support. There were things that I could lean on along the way if I needed to. And that's not the case for everybody. I think, one of the things that comes through with Matt's interview is how much of this they kind of did on their own, on faith and taking big steps. But it was, he mentions that he grew up in the Baptist church, but they chose not to pursue IMB, International
Mhm.
Missions Board, because of certain qualifications and things, which meant Matt wound up doing a lot of legwork on his own, of finding contacts on his own and establishing relationships on his own. And a lot of that part of my journey was pretty effortless because I was part of this kind of system and a program
Mhm.
and all that. So it has made me think about how sometimes there are benefits to all of that, but it also can be stifling.
Mhm.
And so it's also, I can see how sometimes there are benefits to sort of having the freedom to just explore and get to know people, and let those people and those relationships kind of inform what you're doing and how you're doing it, and the path that you're taking into it. So I'm not sure if I'd say I learned that, but it just made me very aware of that, just
Mhm.
how varied different people's callings to the mission field is, and then their journeys into the mission field is, and then the ministries that they're engaging. It's just, there's such a wide variety.
And I kept being brought back to, and maybe it's because I'm in the middle of teaching all of these Old Testament stories and lineages right now. But, I thought about the calling of Abraham, who was, he had a great job in a big, thriving metropolis in Ur. And he was called out of that and into the desert, completely out of his comfort zone. And I kept hearing Matt talk about that, of how everything was good here in Shreveport. Everything was great. He had a job. He was in Shreveport. It's where he'd been all of his life. And he was called out of that into a complete, total unknown. I couldn't help but think that that's exactly what Abraham must have felt like. And then Moses continuously saying, I'm not the guy for this, God. I'm not the guy for this. I don't have the faith journey. I don't have this. I don't have that. And to hear Matt say that a couple of times, of how he hasn't felt as equipped for the calling as he would want to be, that he's still growing in his faith. And then I kept thinking about Paul, and how after the road to Damascus experience, he went away for a while. There's a whole moment in time where we don't hear from him, and we could only assume that that was when he was going to relearn the Old Testament scriptures, to relearn the Torah and see it through Jesus's eyes. And so, all of that to say, I can't wait to pick back up with Matt 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, and see how God is continuously pouring into him and molding him and making him into who he wants him to be, so that Matt and April and their kids can serve God to their fullest. So
Hmm.
that's one thing that I came back away from this interview with.
I just had that same thought while you were talking, is how interesting it would be to get back up with Matt and just see what they're doing, but also see how much they've grown in regards to just understanding their calling,
Mm-hmm.
and how much their relationships with their supporters has grown and changed and all that kinds of stuff too. But I really, really appreciate how honest he was about how difficult things have been at times, and how challenging things have been. I really appreciate that.
Well, we here at the Broken Banquet, we have such a great opportunity to speak to so many people all across the board in all stages of life. And one great thing is we're cultivating relationships with all of these people. So, Will, I do hope that we get to have them back so that we can keep in touch, and so that our listeners can also be part of this journey. What a great way for everyone to sit at the table together.
Yeah, well, it was great talking to him. It was great to see you, Ashley, and look forward to the next one.
Next episode coming up next week. Bye, Will.
Bye, Ashley.
You've been listening to The Broken Banquet, a podcast by Will Bailey and Ashley Goad. Music provided by Irene and the Sleepers. Join us next week for another episode. He's prepared the table. All things are ready. Come to the feast.